Heyo, you're listening to Toasted Time, where I cook your time with some Reddit stories. Right now, you're being toasted with some r/off my chest, where the last story literally sent chills down my spine in horror. But before that story, we'll start off with something a little bit more enjoyable, and then work our way down from there. Yay. Starting off with, girlfriend grabbed my D after I told her no multiple times. Happened this morning. She kept grabbing it and it was seriously bothering me. I told her multiple times to knock it off and that I wasn't joking, but she clearly thought it was some type of game. I had to physically hold her back from doing it, but she kept going for it no matter how many times I told her no, and eventually grabbed it while I was slightly distracted making coffee. Then she had the nerve to tell me that I hurt her arm when I was holding her away from my D. This isn't the first time she's crossed boundaries with it. What? She's had the tendency to interpret boundaries as rejections lately, and whenever I try to establish any boundaries, especially around my D, she just says, "Well, I guess I just won't do it ever again then," implying that if she can't do it in the one context, she won't in any. I'm reaching my limit with this woman. To which everyone down below is in agreement. Starting from Forget Me Prince. Dude, that is SA. She's using manipulation whenever she doesn't get her way and trying to bully you into S. If you've already said no and she isn't respecting it, don't frigging fall for it and break up with her before she tries anything worse. You deserve better. Absolutely. I'm sorry, but there is no coming back from your partner SAing you. This isn't okay. OP deserves better than a partner who does not respect his no. Absolutely. It always gets worse if you stay. Yeah, I always read that. Then, my ex years ago punched me repeatedly, threw a cell phone at my head. Twice. It didn't get any better. I'm okay now though, married with a kid, happy. I doubt that psycho is though, and I'm a guy. I'm glad things are good now. Physical and abuse are often overlooked or shrugged off when men are the victim. And then further down below that, we get a story from Durolumin Furring. I had a similar thing with my ex. He would touch me in ways that I didn't like, and when I would tell him, for example, that I don't like it if he touches my belly button, he would take it as a rejection or make me feel bad for refusing him something so small. And it worked. I did feel bad and kept silent. It really seemed small and ridiculous at the time, but thinking about it in hindsight and considering what happened later, I'm really glad I broke up with him. I suspect this could have turned really dark. It was a clear sign that my comfort was not a priority and that he was willing to manipulate around boundaries and also shift the blame on me for having them. I'd say if this behavior doesn't change immediately, get ready to break up. And maybe find someone trusted or multiple people to talk with you before you do it. She might retaliate and try to make you look bad, etc. And then it would be really good to have someone who knows what's really going on. I hope you get through it without this messing with you too much. To which someone then below that asks a very obvious question. What happened later? I broke up with him because in general, I felt like our approaches to everything were just too different. I could tell that the way I function hurt him a lot, but I didn't want to change those parts of me since I actually finally liked who I was before we met, and he shouldn't have to change to find love either. So I concluded that we'd both be happier with someone else. And well, it wasn't that easy. We met up again to talk and stuff, and we did. But we actually ended up hooking up twice. It was his idea and he initiated each time, and I said I didn't think that this was a good idea, but I can't say I didn't participate. The talks also accomplished nothing. Not a proud moment. Well, the last time we met for a walk, it got awkward and sad. So I just said goodbye and started to go on my way. And he stopped me and started to try and convince me to come back to his. I said no over and over again, but he wouldn't budge, pressuring and begging. It got to a point where the only way for me to get out of there would have been to get really angry or violent, but I just couldn't get angry at him. He was so heartbroken, and I was just so exhausted and embarrassed because we were in the middle of the street. So, after about 20 minutes of trying to convince him to let me go, I gave in and went with him. I just did what I had to be able to leave. We didn't talk for a while after, but at some point he messaged me and we texted, and he wanted to meet up, and I said I wasn't sure that I wanted that, but he was already at my house, and this happened once before while we were still together. I didn't let him in and went outside to talk. I scolded him for showing up at my house even though I said no. He then told me how much it hurt him that I met up with him all those times just to get him to have S with me, and I was speechless. I never met him again. The projection is insane, and I for one could not disagree. But moving on to the next story, and now on with some more where I have to tell my wife about my medical diagnosis today, and I don't know how. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and I have a 31-year-old wife, married for 7 years, and a 3-year-old daughter. I started having major blood pressure and heart rate issues over the last 6 months, and it was always a little high but went out of control recently. My unmedicated BP is 210 to 115, and my heart rate is also always high. I'm constantly getting lightheaded, and I went to my primary doctor first and we tried different combos of medications. It got it lower but never to an average BP. He eventually then referred me to a cardiologist. The cardiologist did a bunch of tests and then called me saying I needed to come in immediately so they could talk to me. Never a good sign. And I went alone, and I just got out of that meeting. I have severe aortic stenosis. The cardiologist told me that I have to have surgery pretty much as soon as possible. He scheduled it for 6 days from now. He told me that if I don't have heart surgery, he'd be surprised if my life expectancy was even 6 months. He went over how it would go in the hospital for at least a week, out of commission for at least 8. And now I'm sitting in my car reading about everything and trying to figure out how I can make everything work. I'm the only one in our house that works. We are dependent on my paychecks, and I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to ever see my 3-year-old daughter grow up. Worst of all, I have to tell my wife when I get home, and I don't think I can without breaking down. I don't even think I can get the words out. I have zero clue how we're going to navigate this. And luckily enough, there is probably a good ending in this whole entire story. And starting off from the comments from Sejon Reddit, hey, aortic stenosis is very treatable, especially if you are young like you are. You have everything in your favor of a good outcome. Modern surgery is amazing. Yes, it is. I had open heart surgery to remove a mitral valve 2 years ago. I bought a cemetery plot and a headstone. No joke. Never thought I would survive. I went back to work, office, light work, in 1 week out of choice. Still ticking. And it's pretty consistent throughout the entire post. Everyone is saying that this is a very treatable thing. So hopefully this dude turns out good with this surgery, but yeah, good story, I guess. Moving on to the next one. And now for the admittedly morbid story that I teased at the beginning. Oh, and before we continue on, this is your trigger warning for infants passing away, which comes after OP's story, so make well with your demons before continuing on. Anywho, I exaggerated my daughter's symptoms so that the doctors would do tests. I want to start off by saying I don't have Munchausen syndrome. I love my kids and I don't want them to be sick. Anyways, my daughter started having episodes of breath holding, abnormal eye movements, and lethargic type symptoms after these episodes. The first time it happened, I took her in and truthfully told them what happened, and I was told it's probably breath holding spells. It is pretty scary for new moms, and we were sent home. The diagnosis didn't sit right with me. Over the course of a month, the episodes were more frequent, happening every day. Multiple times a day. She had an episode where it lasted 2 minutes, so I took her to the ER, exaggerated the symptoms, and they did additional tests, 24-hour EEG and MRI. And then down below there is a comment section that devolves into that trigger warning that I gave you at the beginning. So if this is where you want it, I will make note of the story, of the trigger warning story, but if this is where you want to leave, do it, because it gets kind of dark. It gets really dark. And you continuing on with the comment section, starting off with Lindy Mirkwood. When my daughter was born, she was yellow. Quite clearly yellow as well, and I kept saying to the nurses she had jaundice, but they insisted it was a warding light and new mum hysteria. She was my second child, but go off. I grabbed the doctor doing his rounds and insisted he takes a look, and lo and behold, he takes one look at her and says, jaundice. Fortunately, after a spell under a billy light, she was fine. Sometimes you got to kick up to get things done. And now comes that trigger warning from Windy Orbits. New mom hysteria was the exact same phrase several doctors told my cousin when she was worried about her newborn daughter. Even as a very young new mother, she could tell that something just wasn't right. And they actually laughed at her because her main story was that her baby didn't cry like babies should, telling her what a blessing it was to have such a good baby, aka a quiet baby who never fussed and was not very active and slept longer periods than normal. Turns out her baby, I don't know what it's called, the little flap in the throat that directs air to the lungs and milk to the stomach, did not function properly, so every time she fed her baby, most of her milk would go to the lungs instead. And around 8 weeks, she obviously unknowingly literally drowned her baby while breastfeeding one night. To have a child die is beyond heartbreaking, but once it was found out that she drowned her own child like that, she just broke. Had to be admitted for a very long time. To which someone who goes by Frog Lady has their own story. Even doctors can miss the fact that being quiet can be a sign of trouble. I had a friend who is a pediatrician, as is her husband. Their daughter was always quiet and content to just sit in a chair as a toddler, while mine was bouncing off the walls. Opposite problem. Her mother was smug about it and literally repeated saying, "This is what happens when you go by the book." I wanted to slap her so many times. Turns out that girl is profoundly autistic. It took too long to get their attention and get her proper help. Well, that is about it for those stories today. But if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe to become a fellow breadbag. But aside from that, of course, I hope to see you in the next time toasting session. But until then, have a good one.